All right, first things first, most people do not like when the training guy shows up in sort of in any context, but today what the focus is going to be discussing training programs. Now I named this presentation Building Bridges, and you know that saying has a lot of context and it can be used in a lot of different facets and a lot of different ways. But the way I look at it is, with each training program, you are actually building a bridge for your employees from where they are to where they want to be. And so training programs to me is not just simply putting them on a computer, handing them a paper to read. What it is it's essentially is connecting them with skills and development that will further not only them in your business, but also them in their personal life. So to start this off, I wanted to share with you a couple of statistics. So we'll take a deeper look into training. It is said that in a poll, they looked at the number of employees, and I think they sampled around 1,000 employees. And in the past 6 months of those 1,000 employees, the 1,000 employees, they averaged around 12 minutes of training total between all of them. And so we'll talk about a little bit about how do people perceive training, that you might be giving training and they're not perceiving it as training. But on average, 12 minutes in 6 months. It is said that over $500 billion in corporate America is wasted due to employee disengagement. Okay? 13.5 million is said to be wasted due to inexperienced employees doing their job incorrectly due to the fact of not having proper training. And it is said that 7 out of 10 people are currently, they say that training and development impact the way they view their job. So you're talking 70% of your current employees view training as something that is necessary in their development. So let's take another look. 13% of your current employee base is saying that they are fully engaged in your organization. Only 13%. They also state that millennials, which by 2020 will consist of 50% of your workforce, 87% view training and development as an important part of their job experience. 40% of people leave the job in the first year due to the fact that they felt that there was nowhere to go. And currently in your organization, there's 69% currently looking at job boards, figuring out if there's a better, grass on the other side of the bridge. So these statistics are a little daunting because it kind of paints a picture of how companies can sometimes become extremely results-oriented, but sometimes leave the people that they want the results to occur a little bit behind. And especially with this younger generation coming up, professional development and personnel development is a key component of that experience. So let's take a look, step by step. All right, we have performance problem. So that's how we all start out. There's a performance issue in the workforce, and that performance issue leads to us to look at performance gaps, training assessments, to which we will design a training program that will be held up by objectives, practice in place, and then we will evaluate both results and motivation, and then we'll move to a measured improvement. During any planned activity where your end result is to modify attitude, goals, and behavior, it is also noted that training cannot fix structural, political, or procedural problems within your organization. So if you have procedural, things that are in process, political, there are issues between upper management or any sort of structural issues within the organization, training will not fix that. That stuff kind of has to be modeled and built first before the training can be implemented. Training also has to be paired with an enabling environment, an environment where people feel safe that they're going to progress in their current environment. So, example of this is I worked closely with a district one year to facilitate a training initiative that they wanted all of their staff to partake in. And so we built out this training program, and it had all the works, right? It had the handouts, it had the online environment, it had all the bells and whistles that you would think a training program would be, right? So by all standards, that was going to be successful. Well, they pull all the people in the room, and they give out these great speeches, and they give out these great learning objectives, and this is how you do it, and this is what we want. And then when they put the people back into the place of where they're supposed to carry out this program, they gave the employees no room to grow. So it was counterproductive. They would give them, this is what we need you to do, but then wouldn't give them the environment to actually do it, right? And that can be a problem a lot of times because we have all these grandiose ideas and we have all these training initiatives and all this stuff that we want them to do, but then we put them in an environment and we snuff that out because we don't give them the room to grow. So you have to have an enabling environment. You have to have an environment that promotes this training initiative that we all want, and you have to give them space to grow. And so what we'll look at today is we'll look at these three main points: performance, how to build a training program, and then how to measure said program. And then we will look to see that each training program that we look at or we build needs to have the goal of increased knowledge, improving attitudes, strengthening skills, and improving behavior. So attitudes, behavior, skills, and knowledge. So we want all those things. Your perfect training program will gear towards one of those aspects. A good training program is built from the ground up with the idea of a goal in mind. So before you can do any sort of training program, which people like to jump on and say, we're going to put it online, we're going to make this, we're going to build this manual, before you do any of that, you have to ask yourself, what do you want to achieve? So you have to get the goal out of the way. So let's talk about how we'll bridge that gap. So when we speak about performance, and this is a classic performance gap. It's where you want your people to be versus where they're at. My father knew this better than anyone else. I grew up on a farm in North Carolina, and we raised livestock. So at the time, it was a very small local farm, and my dad was a very task-oriented person. You do this way, and this way. Hey, Dad, how about this? How about that? No ideas were accepted. This is how we've done it. This is how we did it in the generations before you. And this is how we're going to do it, until I leave this earth. And that's his mindset, was this is how we do it. Not open to much change. Well, as a very rebellious boy at some times, I always looked at ways to still do the way he said, but take shortcuts the way I wanted to it, because sometimes I wanted to go off and have fun with my friends, but the farm called me back home. So one of these is when we had animals that would they would die due to disease or whatever, we had to bury them. So it wasn't like take them somewhere. It was a small farm, so when we buried, we literally dug a hole to put the animals in and then cover up. And my dad was like, it has to be by this foot, and this foot. And I didn't believe him. So I dug it half and, make sure that I would do those tasks when he wasn't around to look, over my shoulder. And so I thought, as long as it's covered up, what's the difference, right? So I dug it half. And I put the animal in there, and I covered it up. And I even put a nice little mound on top. right? Because that would show that I dug a really deep hole. If there's a lot of dirt on top, I figured he wouldn't ask any questions. So again, we had where my dad wanted me to be for performance. This is what he wanted. This is where I was at right now. And everything would have been good, right? I would have gotten away with it, except when it rained. All right? When it rains, dirt compacts, and sometimes if something's not very deep enough, it comes back up, right? So after a good rain one season, we went down to the farm where the livestock were, and my dad saw evidence that I did not do what I wanted to do, that he wanted me to do. So we had a very stern performance analysis that day of how to do the job correctly the first time so he wouldn't have to do it again. And so we find this in our own organizations all the time, right? We tell them, this is what you do. This is how you achieve success. This is how we measure you. All right? And then we tell them, because that's what my dad was good at, telling me, but then not necessarily showing me. Right? And so in my head, in a lot of people's minds, if you don't show them why you want this result or how you get to this result, they figure they can take shortcuts to check a box. Yep, I did this. I made my 10 calls. I made my outbound calls, my cold calls. I did check. But did you do it like this? Because this way you can have success with it. The way you did it is just to check a box. And so we have to provide our employees a path to excellence. We have to show them how to get from point A to point B. And it's not just enough to tell them, boop, 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 boop. Because you can tell me to dig a hole, and you can tell me how you dig a hole, but you need to tell me why I need to dig a hole that deep. Or you'll have evidence on a rainy day. All right? So let's talk about bridging the gap and what that looks like. Now, the first thing I like to start out with, and this is a big piece in the education world, and I'm sure some of y'all heard of Maslow's hierarchy. It's a human need assessment structurally, what we need as people. I also like to tack that on to why we need this for engagement, right? So employee engagement. Let's take this age-old tool and let's turn it in engagement. So our first need of every human is survival, okay? That is here in the corporate environment. We know you can take these words and look at it personally, our need to survive, our need for security, our need for belonging, and so on and so forth. But let's look at this from a corporate level. If your employees are currently in the survival stage of life, they are disengaged. They have stuff like, I'm here for the money, I'm a clock watcher, my worth is what my job is. That's all I am to this company is this button pusher, right? And then guess what? I'm leaving when I can. Now, how many people know right now they can think of employees that currently fall in this particular realm? They are on basically survival mode. You're not going to get much performance out of employees that are in survival mode. And that's where you also have high turnover, because they will leave when they get a better opportunity, especially now when the unemployment's so low and the job market's hot. You can go get a job fairly easily. And they do a lot of job hopping. Now, when you move up and you meet the survival needs of your employees, and what that looks like, that it's basically you're meeting all their needs, you're providing them with a pretty good salary, you let them, you basically help them gain financial independence, is how you meet the survival mode of your employees. They then go up into security. Guess what? They're still not engaged, right? Security, you still have people, hey, I'm interested in that overtime. I'm going to work a little harder for you. And I have more sick days than I should. They don't take many sick days when they're in security mode, because they just feel like they need more. They need to somehow feel secure. They got a good job, they got good money, but I want that extra security. I don't really like my job that much. I feel like I'm a hamster in a wheel, and I read job ads constantly, looking for the next opportunity. So, but they move. They're not totally disengaged, but they're not really engaged either. They're kind of like this on this weird line of where they feel like they want to belong, but it's just simply not there yet. Then we're going to move up. Now, how do you start? How do you get your employees to feel safety and security? This is when you start fulfilling the need for structure. If your company provides them a nice organizational structure, they know their boss, they know how things work, they have a policy, they have a procedure, they have all these pieces in place that make them feel secure. And that's how people feel secure in the job force, is if they feel like they're supported, they feel like that they know the process of order, they feel like that they have some sort of backing. That's how you give them security. Then they're going to want to step into the next, how do they feel like they belong? This is almost engaged. They're not quite yet. If you can get them to feel like they belong, you're right there at it. They know they're a part of something bigger, and they're proud to work for your organization. They feel like there's really no career development, and that will leave them to feel like they could leave if they're tempted away. And recruiters are always looking for people in this part, because they're capable of doing more, they're capable of feeling secure, but they just don't quite belong. And if you find an employee that doesn't quite belong somewhere, you recruit them away from their current person, because you can promise them what? What makes people belong? And that's culture. If you have a strong company culture that you can get your employees to wrap around, you will make them feel like they belong to something. Right? So then you move up into the next stage, which is importance. They feel important. Now, what does that look? They finally kicked into engaged mode. I'm a vital part of this business. I feel important at work. I'm an achiever. I'm really busy and might even get stressed out, but because I want to do so much for this company. They are engaged. They become people that are ready to take their next level to their development. They're the people that are craving for you to pour something into them for them to become a better employee. So just real quick, survival. Let's say you meet their monetary needs. Your company has a nice corporate structure that makes them feel safe and secure. You have a culture that is in your business that makes them believe in something bigger than themselves. And now you've made them feel important. And you've made them feel important by offering opportunities to provide feedback. And that's how you make them feel important, when you actually listen to them. Because doesn't everybody essentially want to be listened to in some sort of fashion? You might not do everything they say, but they feel like they're being heard and they feel important. Last step, self-actualization. This is the high flyers. These are what can I do for others. At this moment, when you have an employee that hits self-actualization, they turn the focus off of themselves and start looking at their team around them. They're going to start looking, what can I do for others? How can I inspire others to be where I'm at? I love working here. And you can create what I like to call the advocate level. They become advocates for your company. They start looking for people to join. They start hearing people complain about their work. They will speak up and say, come work where I work. You won't feel like you do there, here, like you do there. That means self-actualization. Now, where does this take part? In any sort of training program. Because if you want to get people to train and move towards goals that you have set for them, they cannot be in these levels. Why? Because motivation to learn and to grow does not kick in until they are an engaged employee. And you have to have engaged employees that they will further themselves to become better employees, and that pushes them into self-actualization, their advocate level, and then what they do is they want to make others around them better. So now that we have that all out of the way, and we want to focus on performance, and you see a need that needs to be filled in a particular role in your business or in your organization, you're going to start looking at 3 critical places in the performance. A, you're going to identify the goal. Where do you want to be? And training doesn't have to be, let's develop a training software. Let's develop a training initiative. Pick something. I want my people to focus on this. And it can be as minute or as grand as you develop it to be, right? So if you have the time and the resource to create this entire program, do it. If you don't and you don't have the resources to spare, focus on that one piece that you want them to focus on. Identify the goal. Identify the objectives. So now you have a goal. How do I get my people to that goal? What must they be able to do to get to said goal? And then after that, you're going to take a look at your audience, which your audience for your training program is your employees. This is who I have to work with. Bill in IT, Chris in sales, Jenna in account management, whatever. These are the people I have to work towards this goal. So you need to identify your goal, identify how to get to that goal, and then recognize the people that you have working for you. And I attune to this to directions. I am a high process person. If you know DISC, I fall on the C part. So I love process, I love order, I love tasks. I go everywhere and anywhere with a GPS. I could have driven there 15 million times. Sometimes I just want to put a GPS. Why? It's not because I forget. I want to know traffic patterns. I want to know if I get somewhere, do I need to turn here before I turn here? I just like to plan, so I put a GPS. Drives my wife crazy because she's like, why don't you just go there? You never know. I could turn right, and it could be a traffic jam. So now I'll know to turn left, right? So your directions to your training program can be as intensive as a GPS that gives you turn by turn, or you can be as simple as handing them a compass and say, go north. And wherever you get that way, you're just heading north. I prefer, and you'll find learners that want that GPS directional, this is what you do, this is how, it's not micromanaging, it's providing clear directional strategy to improving personnel development. And then you have some people that say, go north. That would drive me, where? Where am I going? What am I doing? What's the goal? Go north. Okay, I guess I'll go north. And you have people just going north instead of giving them an avenue to where they need to go. So, step 1, you need to perform what's called a training needs assessment. This falls under those 3 objectives we just talked about: identify the goal, identify the objectives, identify the audience. The steps that I'm going to give you now are listed in step 1, step 2, and so on. Step 1 is you need to do what's called a training needs assessment. Now, a training needs assessment has a couple of components in it. And again, that component is, number 1, you want to identify your business goal. We spoke about that a little bit. Number 2, you want to determine the tasks needed to complete that goal. Okay, we've said that. Number 3, you want to say, what characteristics do my employees need in order to carry out the tasks that will then give them to my goal? See, there's a difference between knowing your employees. You're saying, if I could just have a blank employee right here and I could put characteristics into them, you need to say, what characteristics do I need this employee A to have to then carry out the tasks that I need to then complete the goal, right? I want them to do this. They need to be able to do this, but they need to have these characteristics to do this that will complete the goal. So that's the training assessment. After you do that, I need them to do this, and you look at your people and you map out your goal, their tasks, and their characteristics that you need to train in order for them to be able to carry out said task. Then you move into what's called the keep your audience in mind. All right, and with your audience in mind, you basically want to understand your learner. your employees, okay? And they used to say that, hey, they're goal-oriented. And again, we're speaking about engaged employees because you need to get them to that engaged status first. But you're talking about goal-oriented, self-driven, needs a structure. You need to think about your audience in mind. And then I believe step 3 got cut off, but you want to design your objectives with 2 things in mind. You ever heard of SMART goals? SMART goals, and they need to have A, B, C, D. So SMART goals are they need to be specific, they need to be measurable, they need to be achievable, relevant, and time-based. Specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-based. And that says what it says. It needs to have specific goals that have some sort of measurement to it. And 2, I want them to raise sales up by 30%, by 40%, get 5 deals, get 10 deals, get 20 deals. You need to have a measurement to it. They need to have a goal. We want to increase sales. I want to increase sales by 10 more deals this week. You need to have them achievable. You can't say, hey, I want you to increase deals by 400 this week, tomorrow. I want 400 new deals tomorrow. You need to give them something that is achievable, relevant. So employees automatically going to start looking, is this something that actually pertains to my job? And that happens a lot. With a lot of training, the first thing they sit down and where you're at with me right now, is this even relevant? Do I even want to be here right now? Because everybody, when you say the word training, it's like, training. But if that training was relevant and task specific, and then I want to achieve these new sales goals in a week. I want you on this average by this week. Now you've added a timetable to it. You've given them, you have this long to get this goal achieved. And then you want to make them A, B, C, D. So you want to, every goal should have these 4 parts. They should have an attendee, so a person that's connected to it, your salespeople, your account management. It's going to have people attached to it. It's going to have a behavior attached to it. I want this to occur. I want to see an increase in outbound cold calls. So you're going to have them change their behavior from not making cold calls to an increased cold call. It's going to have a behavior to it. It's going to have a condition. So I want this to occur at this time. Not condition like if you don't do this, you're fired. Condition like I want to have this occur at this time. You're going to tack on something, a differentiator between their behavior, and then it's going to have a degree. And a degree is it's going to have again, it's a timepiece. I want to see this turn around in X amount of days. Okay? And so that's this first step. 1, need assessment. 2, evaluate your employees. And 3, identify or create your goals based off those specifics. So now let's go on actually into the training component. So the training program, if you have your goal, you have your objectives, you have your audience, you have the characteristics, you've labeled all this stuff out. Now it's actually time to sit down and look at the recipe. It's called the recipe. You want to start building out your materials and your objectives for the actual, you have your goal objectives, but now I need to build out the training program's objectives. And this is the umbrella that we're going to be looking under. You want to provide a timeline, you want to provide the means, and you want to provide the opportunity. All right, so when you talk about providing the timeline, nobody likes to have training thrown on them the day of. Boom, I need to have this training done by tomorrow. What? Boom, I want this training done within the next hour. You need to be able to provide your employees a timeline. By the next 30 days, I'd like to have all the salespeople go into our new sales training. Provide the means. And what I mean by the means is the means to practice what you're training. All training needs to be followed up with real life situations where they can practice what they've learned. You have to provide that real world application. And provide the opportunity for feedback. You need to be able to give them a way in which they can communicate with you the success of your training program. So let's dig into these three a little bit deeper. So step 4, we're going to design the materials. Step 5, we're going to develop the materials, which is a little bit different. And then step 6, we're going to implement the training. All this goes into how to build a training program. Step 4, we're going to design the materials. And when you design the materials, I implore that you do not rush this particular component. This must relate to your current objectives, must relate to your audience. It puts your audience in control. So give them a little control of your objectives, your materials. So when you're designing your new materials, you have to give them a little control of their training. They have to have ownership of their training. Must have feedback. And one of the biggest things I like when we're designing materials, chunk information, called chunk it. You don't want to give them 800 principles of time management, 50 principles of time management. And then you're going to ask them, tell me top 10 time management. They're not going to remember 10. You gave them like 80. Chunk your information into short, bite-sized objectives that they can take away one at a time and learn. You can always go back. That's the good thing about training. After you master one, go back and you can tack another goal. Goals can be as drilled down or as broad. I particularly like to have drilled down techniques because then we can measure those drilled down techniques first, come back around, and then you train another one. And you come back and you train another one. Now your materials there's a plethora of ways, and I'm not going to go through a ton of them, but there's a plethora of ways in which you can implement you can develop your training materials. You can use pamphlets, you can use online learning platforms, you can use some books. People have utilized real leadership books in their training. Read this book, provide like book clubs. There's all sorts of ways in which you can actually get as long as they, again, attach to your goal, you can use different platforms to actually carry out your vision for your training program. So if design the materials is kind of like your recipe, when you go to cook, I need paprika and pepper and chicken, and you're going to pull all these things. This is your designing your materials. You're gathering your materials for your recipe. All right? And developing your materials is kind of like cooking. That's you actually taking your recipe and you're starting to now make something out of it. And that's where you pour into your developing. When you go to implement it, that's you're going to set the table and you're going to invite everyone to eat. So this is the time, right? So you could grain the recipe, you can do the cooking, and it looks everything good. But then when you sit down to put that food on the table and everybody comes around the table to sit and try your new meal that you're trying out, that's the time-tested problem area. This is where things can go a little hairy if you're not careful. So when you go to implement the training, you're inviting everyone to say, hey, we want to partake in this particular training initiative, and then I'm going to invite you to tell me what you thought of my meal after the training has taken place. And so with this part, you're going to announce the training ahead of time with a timeline. The next 30 days or the next week or so, you'll see the new training platform come out. I would like that done in 30 days. Okay? You gave the announcement in a week's time. You're going to have the training rolled out, and then I would like you to have it completed within 30 days. So you announce it to them so you don't throw it on them, because managers then can get opportunities to move their schedules around to make sure all their employees, the ones assigned to it, go through the training, and then they have a time objective. I want you done in 30 days. All completed with passing scores. You don't want to be vague. You don't want to be, we have a new sales training. Take it. We have a new training on phone skills. And the phone skills will teach you how to turn cold calls into agreements or into deals. See how that's different? We have sales training. You tell we have new sales training. People automatically going to start thinking, is this relevant to me? But if I say, hey, we have a new sales training that's going to focus on phone training that will take your cold calls and turn them into new deals. That's specific, right? So now I'm saying, oh, yeah, I kind of need to work on that. I need to work on that cold call. So now it's relevant to me. And then I will then be more invested into that particular training. And before you implement, any particular pre-planning training materials need to occur before that step. Before you put everybody out on the table, you need to make sure you have all your ducks in a row, because all it takes is for you to roll something out and it not work right or it not come out, and then all of your employees start to lose confidence in the training itself. The training could be great, but if the implementation is not solid, you could have that problem come up. All right, here is where a lot of people tend to mess up. I have my goal. I have my training. I have given out my training. I'm going to sit back and watch as my people get better and more sales and more deals, and then I'm going to leave it, and I'm going to go off and do something else. Training without measurement is worthless. If you don't have the accountability piece come behind the training and hold people accountable to the goal that you want them to achieve, it won't hold up. For people to build new habits and for people to develop new skills, you don't do it once. You do it multiple times, right? Think of a new skill, and one of these is my son. So when we were trying to teach him how to ride a bike, my son is the classic, I should do everything perfect the first time, and if I don't do it perfect the first time, I wasn't meant to do it. Like that's the stance he takes. So we get him out on the bike, and he just gets on the bike and he rides and he falls over. All right? Even though I'm holding, he falls over. Explain that. So that might be more on my part. But you kind of just let him fall on purpose. I'm not going to be, okay, I'm going to be honest. I just let him fall on purpose. You got to teach him, right? So he falls over, he gets up, and he starts walking away from the bike. I'm like, what are you doing? Got to get back on the bike. He's like, no, I'm done. What do you mean you're done? He's like, I'm just not meant to ride a bike. What do you mean you're not meant to ride a bike? Every kid rides a bike. What are you talking about? He's like, no, it's okay. I don't need to ride a bike. And so in his head, he was all like, I don't need to ride a bike. Yeah, you need to ride a bike. No, I don't need to ride a bike. He was adamant about not riding the bike because of his ability to not do it the first time. And so I was like, well, son, you didn't ride the bike. You fell over, all right? So you have to get back on and try again. And with training programs, you're going to have employees fall off the bike. You're going to have them fail after training. But if you're there with a solid accountability piece and a relationship built with your employees, falling off the bike's not that hard. Then you can teach them, hey, man, right back on the bike, and we're going to do this again. All right? And you need that measurement piece. You need that accountability piece behind the training to make it stick. So again, why not? Measuring expectations, you're going to check your behavior, you're going to check the goal, and you're going to check the results. We're going to evaluate the performance of not the employee, we're going to evaluate the performance of your training. Because the employee is a result of the training. So we're going to look at the training. All right? So let's break this down a little bit more. For training, step 7, we're going to evaluate the training, and then step 8, we'll talk about repeating the training. And for step 7, what we're going to do is we're going to use what's called Kirkpatrick's model. All right? Sounds fancy, but it's really not. It's analyzing 4 parts of your training, and that is the reaction, the learning, the behavior, and the results. Again, that is the reaction, the learning, the behavior, and the results. I actually like to take Kirkpatrick's model and flip it up. And let's look at the results. All right? Then we'll look at the behavior, the learning, and then we'll look at the reaction. So when we evaluate training, we first are going to see what is the result of that training. And the result of training is a lot of people like to focus in on behavior, but I would say instead of focusing in on behavior, how about we focus in on performance? Because performance, a piece of performance is behavior. So if you measure performance, you measure behavior. If they're not engaged and they don't care about it, guess what? The performance will show. You don't have to look at behavior because it will show in the performance analysis. So let's look at that. If we're going to look at them as a result, you're basically going to measure the impact. And see, the impact is measurable by data. Did sales increase? What was the goal achieved? So you're going to look at the results. You're going to look at if it achieved the goal of that particular initiative. You're also going to look at the performance. So the evaluation is testing the learner's capability to perform the skills that you had them work on. So did that performance increase? Did you see an increase in that particular skill? If you want them working on cold calls, did the number of cold calls increase? Yes or no? Pretty basic, right? Again, all these so far, yes sir? Okay. So if you're looking at that, then you're looking at learning. So now we're looking at results, we're looking at performance, and we're looking at the learning. Did they achieve what they need to achieve? And here's the hardest part, motivation. And this is the hardest thing to measure. Did the employee gain motivation through your training? Because all training should motivate your employees to be better employees. So all this, training programs are an enigma that you have to consistently work on perfecting your method and perfecting who. I think this is a big part. Who do you have that's in charge of your training? You need to look at, are they a task-oriented person, and they're going to come through, I want you to boom, 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 and they're not going to look at the personal aspects. Is it a very people-oriented person, and they're not going to do the follow-up, but the people's going to love the training? Do they have a mix? So you also need to look at who's actually performing your training. And then, again, I'm just repeat the training. Just because you take the one training again, have them go back and do it again. And then have them go back and do it again. Refresher, refresher, refresher. And then always make sure your training programs are employee-centric. They're based off of your employees. And then the last statistics I want to leave you with is this number right here, 76. Currently, right now, you have 76% of your staff that is either they are point blank looking for opportunity. So here's the question you need to ask yourself. Is the opportunity that they're seeking going to be with your company or somebody else? Right? So if you have 3/4 of your employee base right now looking, where are they going to find their opportunity? And then I am done. So if you guys have any questions or anything, feel free to ask. But thank you guys for sitting in.